Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Episode. Here, going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it's the end of June. You know what that means? It's time for the MiSTer News Roundup because there's a ton of stuff that happened this June. Before we get too far involved, though, just tell me what you've been playing on MiSTer this month. I'm always curious to hear what people are using the device for. Right off the top, the biggest news is FPGAZumSpass, or Robert, has a core for Nintendo 64. Now, I did a video on it a few weeks ago, and it doesn't do much of anything, but what it does do is show that progress is being made for the Nintendo 64. It is drawing graphics, and currently he's working on the FPU and updating people on that status, but it's so much fun to see the real-time work Robert puts in, and I love that he really talks to the audience about what's going on. Different tests that are passing with the work that he's done so far. All of these different things keep people comprised of what's happening in MiSTer Land as far as Nintendo 64 is concerned, and I really do love following along with the work and showing it to you guys as it comes out. It's the same thing with the PlayStation 1 core. Robert released so many different demos, and of course this is just general emulation footage here, not on the Nintendo 64 core for MiSTer. But this is the type of stuff that can and will come to MiSTer in the future. Robert's mentioned he hopes to have one game playable by Christmas of this year, so it's not going to be soon, but it is on the way. Now moving over to Neo Geo and Neo Geo Pocket Color from Jotego, he was hoping to have a beta of this core available a few weeks back, but ran into some issues with the operating system or BIOS screen and where it was putting some of the graphics. He has now gotten past that, and you can see here in this example, everything is as you would expect if you've ever owned or used a Neo Geo Pocket or Color. So it is getting much closer, although it isn't still here at the time of releasing this video. It could be out tomorrow. He does love releasing things on Friday after all. But as much fun as the Neo Geo AES, MVS, and CDR, the Pocket is a ton of fun as well. And it's one of the last handheld pieces of hardware that is not available on MiSTer FPGA until you get to stuff like the Nintendo DS generation. And there are so many different fun games to play, and the best thing about it coming to MiSTer is, even if you own a handheld system and you've modded the screen on it, the screen is still quite small, and there's only so much you can do as a handheld system. Being able to play these games on your television or even on a CRT or PVM is going to be a great experience compared to the handheld mode. And there's so many fun and unique games like Dark Arms Beastbusters here, kind of like an action RPG. I can't wait for more people to experience what's going on with Neo Geo and Neo Geo Pocket Color, because there is so many games to play, and hopefully by next month we'll be just telling you that it is out. Speaking of Jotego, he's also released the beta for the Super Contra from Konami. Now this is another absolutely spectacular Hall of Fame first ballot voting good game for the arcades. And leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've played Super Contra before, because compared to Contra on the NES, this is not one that's talked about near as much. But it is here on MiSTer, and you can play it today, and it is another spectacular implementation from Jotego and his team. This is exactly what you want out of an arcade game. Just be aware that it is painfully challenging, just like Contra on the NES, but it's so much fun because you're not giving it real quarters here in FPGA. But in my playtime with the game, I can't tell any differences from original hardware, but it has been a long time since I've played an original board for this game. But it is just absolutely a blast, and it is here from Jotego, and I love all his Friday arcade releases. We're getting so many great Konami things from him, and I can't wait to see what the next Konami games that are coming out from him will be, because Konami has such a stacked library in arcades. It is just so much fun. And this is all just derivative work of his Aliens beta core that came out a few months ago, or maybe last month. A lot of these use very similar hardware, and this is not the era of Konami that gets remembered near as much as when you get to stuff like The Simpsons or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These are deeper cuts, and it's so great to have them on MiSTer because they're absolutely spectacular. So if you haven't tried out Aliens or Super Contra yet, definitely do it. Trust me, you're going to love it. Now, keeping on the hardware side with Toaplan here, there are two new games that are coming to MiSTer, and that's going to be Vamana and Fire Shark. These are two shmups, and Toaplan is well known for their shmups. And it's so much fun to get more games on the arcade side, especially for manufacturers that aren't the Segas and the Capcoms and the Konamis of the world. Both of these games are absolutely spectacular shmups, and I feel like a lot of people will not know that they existed or haven't played them in forever. But if you've ever played either of these games, leave me a comment down below, because I would be curious who played them and who hasn't. But again, on MiSTer here, it is spectacular to see these games. I love all of these arcade releases because there's so many different arcade board manufacturers that you can check out. If you haven't seen all of what's available, I'll leave a link down below to System 16. It's basically the encyclopedia of different arcade boards, their manufacturers, and what games ran on them, because it is just such a massive library for 80s and 90s stuff in the arcades, and so many of these games never made it over to North America. They were Japanese exclusives. MiSTer is going to be the best way to play basically all of them outside of buying original arcade boards. Trust me, these Toaplan shmups, if as a PCB, are not going to be cheap. We're not talking cave pricing, but we're definitely talking about an expense. But something like Fire Shark here, if you don't want to play Vimana and the space theme, you have a military shmup as well, and they are both vertical or tate shmups, and I know a lot of people love them. But it is just so much fun again to see all of this stuff coming to MiSTer, because now that we basically have almost every single console and handheld gaming device available from the 80s and 90s, the arcade is 100% going to be where it's at. And basically, if you feel like 90% of the 8 and 16 and a lot of the 32-bit generations already on MiSTer for consoles is concerned, when it comes to the arcades, we basically have like 2 to 3% of what exists. And speaking of arcades, the Track 17 here is now working on Data East RoboCop 2, and that work will definitely be informative to a lot of other games that ran on that board or derivative hardware. And again, Data East is not as well known as Capcom or Sega, but they've got some absolutely spectacular 8 and 16-bit arcade games, and they also have some incredibly weird and strange arcade games at that. And the thing is, these boards are definitely rarer than stuff from Sega and Capcom as well. I still remember the first time I played RoboCop 2 in arcades as a kid, and I fell in love with it. It's as good today as it was then, with a mix of side-scrolling beat-em-up levels and these pseudo-first-person shooting levels as well. Now, definitely a lot of people have played RoboCop 2, but there's a ton of other games that run on this board. They may have slight hardware deviations because compared to consoles, arcade makers would release multiple games on the same board, but slightly tweak the hardware. But this is basically the library you're going to get off a board that would run RoboCop 2. Something like Two Crude Dudes, absolutely amazing game. Well, there's deep cuts like the cliffhanger Edward Randy here. It is a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up game that has some incredible sprite scaling that can rival the best of what Sega could do in that generation. And this is a very expensive arcade board as well, and emulation for it can be shaky in MAME. Not to knock MAME whatsoever, all of this is very intricate work and I'm sure it will get improved, but I can't wait to see a potential Edward Randy core for MiSTer FPGA, because trust me, from start to finish, this game is intense and action-packed, and it's 100% a game you want to play on MiSTer. But speaking of a Track 17, they're also looking at implementing Batsugan on MiSTer FPGA. It's another shmup, it's also from Toaplan, and it's also an incredible game. And it's so much fun to have all these shmups on MiSTer, basically from a lag standpoint in and of itself. A lot of these games, these challenging pseudo-bullet hell games or straight bullet hell games, if there's any lag in the emulation whatsoever, it is going to become such a harder time to play it. But on MiSTer, if you're on an analog television with a hardwired arcade stick, it is basically like playing on the original board, and that's how you want to practice these games. But I am curious, who here is a shmup fan, and what is your favorite shmup? Because I do notice shmup content on the channel doesn't do well compared to everything else, and I really am curious who does care about these shmup cores. I'm sure a lot of you are going to say you do, but it always helps me with research. But again, this would be another incredible addition to MiSTer, because it is an incredibly fun game, and holy hell is it challenging. It's been some time since I played it, but I was almost able to get out of stage 1 without taking a single death. Now, speaking of shmups, but a core that has more than just shmups on it, Wicker Waka did release that turbo core for the Irem M92 board, and I did a comparison video that I will leave a link to the description below. But if you have not checked this out yet, definitely give it a go, because one of the biggest complaints of the original core, this has nothing to do with Wicker Waka but Irem's developers, is that there are a lot of slowdown in both In the Hunt and Gun Force 2. And that is true. See, I'm the type of person that doesn't mind that slowdown so much, but I know a lot of people don't like it. So Wicker Waka did release that 2X core, and like I said earlier, I will leave a link to the comparison below. Because when you put something like In the Hunt, the stock version on the left, compared to the turbo version on the right, you can see the definitive improvements in the speed. It's so much fun to have both the original and turbo side by side, and I do love it, so definitely check it out. Now again, I did a video last week on this, but the Taito System SJ core is here. Now this is earlier 80s stuff, and for some of you, you may not have been alive when this came out, but it runs elevator action, and that's all you need to know. This is one of the most addicting, most challenging and fun games of its generation, and while it has been released on basically everything, having a core here for MiSTer is spectacular, because this predates some JAMA era stuff as well, so collecting these boards can be its own thing completely. But I have played a ton of elevator action since the core came out, and it is 100% outstanding. And of course, if you never played the sequel Elevator Action Returns, I highly recommend you check that out as well, because it's just more of a good thing on Sega Saturn. But the System SJ core is here. About 90% of the games on the board are playable, and you can play it today. And trust me, you want to check it out. Even if you didn't grow up with these games, even if they don't look familiar, there is a ton of fun to be had, and it's another board and another platform for the arcades that is here today. So we talked about Jotego and we talked about a Track 17. Now let's talk about them both in the same section, because the Track 17 loaned Jotego and his team a Proteus DAW board, and they are working on schematic extraction right now. And that is basically tracing every single via, every single trace on a PCB to understand how it hooks up to every single chip, processor, RAM unit, and everything else on the board. And all of that work goes to do something like having Proteus DAW potentially playable on MiSTer in the future. And I know this game is available on other pieces of hardware. It is available on PlayStation 1, so you can play it on FPGAZumSpass PlayStation 1 core, but so often it is the arcade original that is the best, and for preservation purposes alone, I can't wait to have something like Proteus DAW on MiSTer. It is an outstanding shmup. It's one of the best Konami ever made, and hopefully by the end of the year we will be playing it. Now, taking a look at the progress for the Williams Midway Z and Y core, it is getting better. Now, it's going to get even better than what I'm showing you right here, but I'm showing you an older preview for a very specific reason we'll get to in just a moment. But the maker of this core had some of the tests passing, but some of those chips are coming up as bad. But this is another iconic set of hardware. Stuff like Terminator, an amazing quote-unquote light gun game, which is actually potentiometer based, runs on this hardware, and this is iconic 90s arcade goodness right here. There's just so many games on these boards that are so much fun to play, and my favorite part is, compared to Japanese developed arcade games, all of these Western games have a different vibe, flair, and feel to them, and they are incredible. And I know so many people have been waiting to play the original arcade release of Mortal Kombat on MiSTer, and it seems like the progress is getting us closer to that every single day. Although it might be slightly delayed, because Pramod here did get it testing better, but he told everyone he might be a little delayed because him and his wife had a baby. That is incredible news. Congratulations to them. It's so exciting to hear that, because so many people make cores, so many people make videos, but not everyone has a baby every single month. So that's probably the most exciting news in this entire June video. There's a new MiSTer baby, and I love to see it. Now, staying on the arcade side of things, Kick and Run has been improved. It's on MiSTer, and while I absolutely am garbage at this game, I know there's a lot of soccer or football fans out there, especially the European audience, so you can 100% play this today. Just play it better than I did, because I had a gore scold on me within the first 10 seconds. And of course, Kiki Kai Kai, another incredible running gun game that would go on to basically form the basis of Pocky and Rocky on the Super Nintendo, and Pocky and Rocky Reshrine that just recently came out. This is an amazing game. It's a very difficult game, and it's not a game that you're going to see in like 99 out of 100 arcades if you walk into them. You'd have to go to a very specialized arcade to see something like this, or you can just check it out on MiSTer FPGA, and that's why I love doing these news updates videos. It's not just stuff like the Nintendo 64, the big news of the month that I love. It's all of these smaller arcade games, things that maybe people didn't exist, but tell me down below if you knew about Kiki Kai Kai or not. I would be curious. And on a completely non-gaming related situation for MiSTer, there is a new feature where you can adjust your INI file for your phone that a developer is working on. Now, I personally don't think it's that hard to go into the INI, but I understand a lot of people would like to do this from the comfort of their couch, and there's going to be a phone app for that. That is a lot of fun, and I do like that kind of functionality coming into MiSTer as well. It will be fun to check this out for sure, and tell me if you want to see a video. But honestly, the news of the month has got to be Robert's Nintendo 64 core executing some code on MiSTer. It is so much fun to follow along with the development process of things like this. I just really like seeing how these cores get made, and Robert's so communicative with the MiSTer community. He's basically commenting every single day on Discord, telling people what he's working on, how it's going, the challenges, and what comes next. But that is your news for June. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you hope to see in July, because I've got a lot of ideas myself. We're getting deep into the summer. I hope you all have a great July 4th, and I will see you next month for more news, but I'll have a MiSTer video every Thursday and videos throughout the week. But we're done. Bye-bye.